Hello, my lovely anatomists and physiologists, and welcome to the small intestine. And I am going to put little stars all the way around my small intestine here because, on some level, it is the essence of the digestive tract. And I say this because the small intestine is going to be the primary digestive organ. So most of your digestion is happening here. Your digestion is finished here. It's getting, of course, help from accessory structures such as the liver, gallbladder, and pancreas. And then, of course, well, hey, it got all kind of help already, right? From the mouth and the stomach. So we had little bits of digestion happening there as well. We see that almost all nutrient absorption happens here. So, hey, there's no point to the digestive tract if we don't get to absorb those nutrients. So that's really, really important. Let's go ahead and remind ourselves that that's happening in the jejunum. And then when we talk about absorbing nutrients, let's go ahead and list that you're going to absorb like 90% of your water in the small intestine and about 80% of your electrolytes here as well. So that's going to be pretty important. And then let's give one other job of like regulating the GI tract. So we see with the digestive system, like there's a lot of localized control here, whether we're talking about the actual, anterior nervous system control, we're talking about the endocrine control, we'll see that very much it's localized. So I think we're assigning basically 3 functions here to the small intestine. Now it's called small intestine because it has a very small diameter compared to a large intestine. But it's super long. It's the longest part of the whole tract. It's 10 feet long. And the living adult, and I say living because muscle tone makes it shorter, and you'll get a number in your textbook for the cadaver. It's even longer. And then we see that it's highly folded. And so we're increasing the surface area like 600 times because of the extensive folding. So even though it's called small, that's kind of like a joke because it's really expansive. It's long and folded, right? Okay. I have a picture here of our model in the lab that's showing small and large intestine. You can actually see a tiny piece of the of pancreas there as well. So let me go ahead and label these sections. So the top portion, so let me label that's actually pancreas up there. Top portion of the small intestine, which we see as kind of this very highly coiled tube, is called the duodenum. The bulk of the small intestine is called the jejunum. And then the very end, taking us to the large intestine, which we see in gray, is the ileum. And so we could, if we wanted to highlight these regions, so let me see if I can sort of do that here, maybe about just there for duodenum. And then I'm going to do like this pinky color for jejunum. And I don't really see it, so let me change it to this color here. That's much better. You know, I'm just sort of eyeballing, so you may want to also like double check in your textbook to get like a really nice professional sort of thing. And I'm going to pick red because I think that's going to be able to be visible over here on this side a little bit better. Okay. When we talk about our small intestine, I said it's expansive. And what we're going to see is it has, this is where digestion is finished and nutrient absorption takes place. And so it's going to have 3 special features. To increase surface area. And we're going to see circular folds, which can also be called plique circulaire. And so circular folds are going to be ridges in the mucosa and submucosa. These circular folds are important because it's slowing down the chyme as it moves through. So if the wall of the small intestine was smooth, it'd be like a slip and slide. And all of that rich nutrient chyme would just like slip on through the small intestine and you wouldn't have time to like digest and absorb. So having all these folds is creating a turbulence, it's slowing that chyme down. Next, you have villi. And the villi are going to be described as hair-like, vascularized projections. And they're on the folds. And each one is going to contain a capillary bed and a lacteal. And if I can get my green marker, I'm going to circle my lacteal in green because that's going to be a lymphatic capillary. So maybe let's label that way. And then the third important structure, and I'll try to give you a visual next, is called the microvilli. And the microvilli is on the cellular level. It's extremely small. So these are extensions of cell membrane. Making it easier to get material into the cells of the small intestine. So it's a cellular level extension cell membrane of the mucosal epithelial cells. Mucosal epithelial cells. And we're going to call these also like brush border, which I'm going to highlight, and I'm going to highlight it in the same highlighter color I used for my jejunum, because that's where we're going to see the brush border. All right, now when I think about this plique circulaires or circular folds, the villi and the microvilli, I actually think about the landscape of East Tennessee, which is where we are. And we're in the mountains, and especially in the late fall, winter, early spring, as you're driving and looking at the ridge line, I see the mountains, I see the ridges, and I think, oh, those are my plicae circulares. And then I can see trees sticking up all along the ridge line, and I think of those trees as my villi. So what I'm going to do is draw my plicae circulares or circular folds, and I'm going to make it look like two mountain ridges. But instead of doing like a straight kind of line, I'm going to make my line look like little tiny mountains all along the ridge line. So I'm going to do like a up and down to make like my first ridge, and I'm gonna do a second one to kind of do the same. So folded, folded, folded. So each of these like ridges would be like a circular fold. Remember, that's my mucosa and my submucosa. And then as I'm looking at each one of those extensions, we can think about each one of those as a villi. And so now I'm going to take my green and I'm going to show oops, too thick. And I'm going to show a lacteal sticking up. So I'm just going to draw like a green line sticking up into each of those villi all the way. This is maybe sort of a bad example because it's looking like, where does my lacteal fit into anything? But I'm going to leave it. And then I'm going to do my red line for my capillary bed. So now maybe draw a blood vessel coming in to that particular area. Okay, taking a little creative license there. And then if we were to zoom in on that villi, you would see the cell is a simple columnar, but it has those extensions, those cellular extensions coming up off the cell. And so if I'm going to go back over here to my listing for my microvilli, I'm going to go ahead and draw like a simple columnar epithelial cell with microvilli at the top. Okay, and so these are the special features that we're seeing in the small intestine for increasing the surface area. And then we're also going to see some other important features. So we're also going to see, and these aren't about increasing surface area, these are just important features. We're also going to see duodenal glands. Oh, wait a minute. Let's type that under duodenum. So we're going to have duodenal glands. And so these are going to be important in making that bicarbonate rich mucus. So this is going to help stabilize the acidic chyme. So bringing it back down into like more neutralized area. And then let's also just make a note that we have the mucosa associated lymphoid tissue, remember, heavily in this particular area. Now, as we do look at each of these regions, we'll see the duodenum is that first top portion of the small intestine. It does contain these duodenal glands secreting this bicarbonate-rich mucus, which is helping to stabilize the pH. Remember, we have a super acidic chyme dumping in about 3 milliliters at a time into this particular area. But we're also going to see that the duodenum is going to secrete hormones to help regulate this whole system. And we're going to just look at those in the next video because this one is getting kind of lengthy. So let's go ahead and highlight that we're secreting important hormones here in the duodenum. If we go back to looking at the jejunum, this is like the middle and the largest region of the small intestine. And this is where we're going to finish digestion and absorb our nutrients. And remember, we're doing this really at that area that's described as the brush border. So that's the microvilli of those cells lining. And we'll see, yeah, I think that's a good enough description there. And then as we talk about the ileum, we'll see that it regulates movement into the large intestine. And if we zoom back in on our picture here, I'm gonna sort of erase my highlight just so you can see right here, you have what's described as the Iliocell Valve. And that's helping to regulate movement from the small intestine to the large intestine. Iliocell valve is going to get pushed open when motility is really high in this particular area. And then we'll see too that the ileum is where we're going to be absorbing vitamin B. So we're saying that the ileum is going to be important in absorbing vitamin B12, which remember this is going to require the intrinsic factor, which we said was made in the stomach by parietal cells. The last little thing I want to mention here is that we are doing both peristaltic and segmentational movements here in the small intestine, where peristaltic movement is the propulsion and segmentation movement is the mixing. All right. Up next, we're ready to move into the large intestine. So stay tuned. As always, take care of yourselves and each other.